I received 3 stories, each from a different small town, each from someone who thought they were safe. A place everyone was warned to avoid, until the night they saw what waited there. A quiet pharmacy job, and a customer whose obsession turned deadly. A snowy shortcut home, that led to a van, a marked truck, and something far too close. Ordinary towns. Ordinary nights. But in each of them, something terrifying was waiting. I'll read them to you. The Ridge. My name is Rowan Hale. I'm 19 now, and I've spent all 19 years inside a town that could fit into a single high school gym. 800 people, one blinking red light, and 1,000 ways to know when someone's lying, because out here you can hear the lie echo across the fields. We move slow, say hello, eat pie at the diner, and pretend that nothing ever happens. That's not true. Things happen. They just happen where we're trained not to look. On the edge of town there's a rise of ground covered in broom grass and scrub oaks. Nobody ever called it anything poetic. It was just the ridge. Not a place, more like a rule. Don't ride your bike there. Don't camp there. Don't even stare too long when you pass it, because bad habits start with looking. Adults never explained why. If you asked, somebody would sigh and say, "Because I said so," and flip the conversation to weather or crops or the Wildcats' chances this Friday. That refusal was lighter fluid on curiosity, and it soaked me and my best friend Mason from the time we were old enough to pedal. Mason is 2 years older than me, always had a chipped tooth and the personality of a firecracker. When I was 10 and he was 12, I slept over at his place one thick summer night. The fan in his window pushed hot air around like it was doing us a favor. We told ghost stories with the lights off until there were no stories left, just silence and heartbeat. And then he said it. "Let's go see the ridge." As if it were a dare so simple you couldn't be a coward about it. I wanted to say no. I swallowed it. He grinned, and I remembered that being brave in a small town is often just refusing to be the first to blink. We slipped out after midnight. The gravel made that glassy crunch under our sneakers, and the bugs sang like somebody had turned the radio up too loud. When the ridge came into view, it looked taller than any hill had a right to be. The moon smudged the edges of the grass so it moved like a lake. We dropped to our bellies near the crest, killed our flashlights, and crawled to peek over. Down by the old oak, an oak so big it looked like it had survived 3 separate endings of the world, 20 or so people stood in a ring. Long black robes. White masks that were blank except for the black holes of eyes. Each held a candle cupped by both hands. The flames were steady, like the air itself had stopped breathing for them. I expected words. What came out of them wasn't words. It was a sound that seemed to vibrate my bones individually, a hive noise that made my molars ache. Every part of me whispered run, but the message took the long road from my brain to my legs. Then Mason's sneaker knocked loose a stone. It hopped twice and cracked against another. The sound was small and also as loud as a gunshot. The hive noise cut off. All those white ovals tilted up toward us, and the world shrank to the width of Mason's hand clamping my wrist. We didn't try to be clever. We slid backward on our stomachs, then bolted, tearing grass, tumbling down the far side, cutting across the rail bed and not caring about the cinders that chewed our knees. I felt something. Steps? Breath? Close enough to change the temperature of my back, but I didn't look. We didn't stop until we were behind Mason's shed, small and hyperventilating and 13 kinds of sure we'd die if we spoke out loud. We didn't tell his parents, didn't tell mine. The next morning we acted like boys again, and that's a job small-town boys know how to do. Time did its thing. We finished school, found work, learned how to wave to strangers without inviting conversation. The ridge stayed on the edge of everything. If I approached it on my bike, I'd steer a little wider than necessary and feel something watching, like the hot stare you get when you sit too close to a bonfire. Then, this spring, Mason showed up on my porch with a look that meant trouble, or a good story. "Ever think about going back?" he asked, and the answer was yes and no at the same time. He said we were older now, stronger, not the idiots who crawled on their bellies. We could go with flashlights, with phones, with knives we'd never use. We could end the not knowing. The word no sat in my throat like a stone. I swallowed it again. We picked a night with no wind. 1 a.m. Because we remembered the old ring didn't form until late. We parked 2 streets over and walked without our lights, saving them for the crest. The ridge looked the same, which is to say it looked like a place that had been waiting. No ring of people. No candles. The oak stood there with its arms out, and the long grass hissed around our knees. The quiet felt polished. Maybe we dreamed it, I said, trying to sell a lie to 2 people at once. Look, Mason breathed. At the base of the oak, someone had laid out a circle of fist-sized stones, the kind that have no business being that smooth unless a lot of hands have handled them. In the middle sat a wooden box, the kind you might keep letters in. It looked new and old at the same time, freshly sanded but stained with history. Mason crouched. I wanted to pull him back up by the hoodie, but that same old dare hunger had its fingers in me, too. He lifted the lid. Masks. 5 of them. White, featureless, the paint so matte it drank the moon. They were clean in a way nature doesn't allow. Underneath them lay a strip of red cloth, folded and refolded until it remembered the shape of the hands that did it. The temperature changed. I don't know how else to say it. The air went thin and cold, and the skin at the base of my neck tightened like it was trying to make a fist. I turned slow, because prey that runs too early gets chased, and saw shapes, 3, 4, just past the tree line. Not moving. Not hiding well either. Watching like they had nowhere else to be. Rowan, Mason said, and that was all we needed for a plan. He dropped the lid. We stood. We walked at a pace that said we belonged there right up until we were over the top, and then we let our bodies tell the truth. We ran like the ground was tilting us forward, stumbled down the road, didn't stop at our houses but kept driving until the gas gauge begged. We slept in his truck behind a 24-hour feed store 2 towns over, the kind of exhausted sleep where every sound bends itself into footsteps in your dream. We didn't go to the sheriff. What were we going to say? There are people with hobbies that make us uncomfortable. We didn't tell our parents, because we understood suddenly that their silence had been a kind of fence they'd built with whatever lumber they had. We let it stand. Since that night, the ridge has been more than a shape on a map to me. It's an event that keeps happening, no matter where I am. A flash of white in a crowd. A circle of stones at the edge of a construction site. A box in a thrift store that I will not touch. Sometimes I think about the adults when I was little, how they lowered their voices like church wasn't a building but a boundary. I used to think they were superstitious. Now I think they were tired. There are places that belong to the town, and places the town merely exists beside. The ridge is the second kind. It doesn't need a sign to tell you where it starts. You can feel the start in your teeth. One day, if I ever have kids, I'll teach them to ride without training wheels in the wide empty school lot. I'll clap when they wobble and cheer when they don't fall, and after we eat our celebratory pie, I'll kneel and tell them about the ridge. I won't dress it up. I won't explain. I'll just give them the only rule that ever mattered here: don't go there. Don't play there. Don't look too long. Because some places are only quiet on the surface. Because some eyes don't blink. Because I've learned that safety isn't the absence of danger, it's the discipline of leaving certain doors closed. And if they ask me why, I'll say the truest thing I've got: you don't have to know why for it to be real. The letters. My name is Claire Donovan, and when I was 19, I thought I had life all figured out. I just moved to a dusty little Arizona town with my boyfriend. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. 4 stores, 1 stoplight, and a heat so dry it cracked your lips before noon. I worked at the local pharmacy, the Walgreens right off Main. The kind of place where half the town eventually wandered through. For 3 months, my life was simple: ring up customers, stock shelves, eat fast food on my break. I knew most of the regulars by sight: Mrs. Parker buying vitamins, the Sanchez twins raiding the candy aisle, and then there was him. He was lanky, late 20s maybe, always in the same faded polo shirt. His glasses slipped down his nose when he talked, though he never talked much. He'd shuffle up with a bottle of Diet Coke and whatever medicine he claimed was for his mother. I figured he was just shy. A little awkward, sure, but harmless. Compared to some of the guys I'd met in Arizona, he was practically invisible. I wish he had stayed invisible. One afternoon, just before my shift, the manager, Mr. Graham, called me into his office. He didn't say much, just motioned to the desk. There, laid out in neat rows, were at least 30 envelopes. Each one had my name written on it in slanted handwriting. "Do you know this person?" he asked, tapping one return address. The name read Ethan Lowe. I shook my head, confused. Mr. Graham slid one of the envelopes toward me. "Read it." Inside was a letter, actually, 2 letters, written in looping handwriting, almost childlike. Tucked between them was a magazine clipping of a blonde woman brushing her hair. The words crawled across the page, switching between diary entries and love notes. He wrote about me, about my hair, the way it would smell under the desert moon. About watching me at the register. About wanting to brush my hair himself. He underlined certain sentences, highlighted whole paragraphs. One in particular made my blood run cold. "You glow under the moonlight. I see it, even when you're not looking." I looked up at Mr. Graham. My throat was dry. "You know him?" he pressed. And then it hit me. The Diet Coke. The shaky glasses. The man who always lingered at my register no matter how long the line was. Ethan Lowe. I remembered, weeks earlier, feeling someone behind me while I stocked aspirin. When I turned, he was there, fingers sliding through my hair like it belonged to him. He'd mumbled an apology, and I had brushed it off as weird but harmless. Now it didn't feel harmless at all. Mr. Graham told me Ethan was banned from the store and sent me home early. "We'll handle it," he said. His voice didn't make me feel handled. 2 hours later there was a knock at my door. When I looked through the peephole, my stomach flipped. Not Ethan. Worse. There were 7 people on my porch, 2 plainclothes officers with badges, a few uniformed cops, and 3 in tactical gear holding rifles. I opened the door, half convinced I was dreaming. "We need to talk to you about these," one officer said, lifting the stack of letters. They came inside. My boyfriend hovered with his arms crossed, like I'd invited all this drama. The officer explained, when police went to Ethan's house to serve him a trespass notice, he lost control. He screamed that I wanted to talk to him, that we had a special connection, that nobody understood. He grew so emotional, so unstable, that they charged him with stalking. Then came the words that still echo. "You should know, Ethan killed his mother when he was 12. He was released from a juvenile psychiatric facility just 4 years ago." I sat frozen, my skin crawling. They told me they'd also found disturbing materials in his house, evidence he'd been following me, maybe even planning something. They wouldn't give details, just that it was enough. Enough to make every officer in the room agree I was in danger. I kept picturing him in the checkout line, placing that bottle of Diet Coke on the counter with quiet hands. "Always. For his mom," he'd said. He was arrested the next day in the Walgreens parking lot, just sitting in his car and staring at the building. Waiting. The police said he'd likely be returned to a psychiatric hospital rather than prison. I never saw him again. I never read the rest of the letters either. They were locked away as evidence. My boyfriend blamed me, said I must have been too friendly. A week later, I packed my bags and went home to Montana. It was colder there, but the cold felt like protection. Even now, years later, I think about Ethan. About how normal he seemed. How harmless. How close I came to being another headline. And whenever I'm in a store and catch someone staring too long, I remember the sentence underlined in yellow ink. "You glow under the moonlight." It wasn't poetry. It was a warning I didn't understand until it was almost too late. The van in the snow. My name is Tyler Reed, and I used to believe I wasn't the kind of person anyone would mess with. I'm 6'1", 200 pounds, broad shoulders from hauling farm equipment since I was a kid. The kind of guy people call big man when they walk past. For a long time I thought that meant safe. That was before one night in the dead of winter, when I learned how thin the line between safe and hunted really is. It was a Friday in January, the kind where the air burns the inside of your nose. I'd just finished a 4-hour shift helping my aunt at the college stadium concession stand. She runs the booth, sells ice cream, candy, sodas, feeds the crowd when 5,000 people pile in to watch a game. That night she sent me home with one last job: pick up heavy-duty spoons for the weekend rush. The only store that carried them was on the far side of town. I wanted to get there quick, grab the spoons, and then meet my buddies. Instead of taking the long, well-lit route, I chose the shortcut, an empty road skirting the outskirts of town. It was snow-packed, poorly plowed, but faster. For the first few minutes, it was just me, the hum of my pickup, and a curtain of stars overhead. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him. A man. He was trudging through the ditch in shorts, a t-shirt, and a backwards cap, when it was 10 degrees out. His legs were bare in the snow, but he walked like he didn't feel a thing. My first instinct was to stop. I even reached for the signal. But my mom was on the phone with me, and when I mentioned him, her voice sharpened. "Do not stop. Not out there. Remember what happened to that college girl?" I kept driving, passing him at about 40 miles an hour. I tried to shake it off, but not half a minute later, headlights flared in my rearview mirror. A car had pulled out of a field entrance I could have sworn didn't exist. It slid onto the road behind me, steady close. At first I told myself it was nothing. Just another driver. But when I turned left, the car turned left. I turned right. They turned right. I went twice around the empty roundabout, skipping my exit on purpose. They stayed locked on me. My heartbeat quickened, but I still wasn't ready to admit I was being followed. Maybe they lived near the store too. Maybe coincidence. I tested them. Blew through a stop sign at a dead intersection. They rolled through right after me, tires squealing to catch up. That was the moment the hair on my arms lifted. I should have driven straight to the police station. But instead, stubborn and stupid, I kept going toward the store. At least there'd be people there. Light. Witnesses. When I pulled into the lot, I thought relief would hit. Instead, dread sank deeper. Because the car followed me in, parked a few rows behind. They didn't get out. They just sat. I swung around and parked by the gas station side, pretending to fuel up. 10 minutes passed. The car stayed. I gave my buddies a quick call, rattled off the license plate just in case, then headed into the store. That's when the van appeared. A white van slid into the space directly beside my driver's door. Windows covered. Engine running. Nobody visible inside. I froze. The kind of freeze that lives in your spine. I went straight to customer service, told them everything. They looked at me like I was some paranoid kid. But through the sliding doors I could see it, the van idling, the other cars circling the lot. 30 minutes crawled by. Eventually, the van pulled forward. The car met it on the far side of the building. I watched them through the Starbucks window as the drivers leaned toward each other. Then both vehicles drove off into the dark. I dashed out, jumped into my truck, and sped to my friend's place. When I parked in his garage, one of the guys pointed at my tire. "What's that orange mark?" My stomach sank. Someone had tagged my truck. While I was inside, one of them had gotten close enough to touch it. To mark me. We searched the truck and found more. In the bed, half buried in snow, was a metal pipe wrapped in duct tape. 18 inches long. Not mine. That's when the joke stopped. The next morning the police came. They bagged the pipe as evidence, said they'd run the plate number I gave them. But their words were flat. No crime had been committed. They couldn't do much. Which meant whoever they were, whoever waited in the snow, whoever circled the lot, whoever leaned out of that white van, they were still out there. I tell myself it was a scare tactic. A prank. But late at night, I remember the man in shorts and a backwards cap, walking calm through a ditch of snow like he was waiting for me. I think about how easily they touched my truck without me knowing. I think about what could have happened if I'd stepped outside at the wrong moment. And I don't feel like the big man anymore. Because now I know, anyone can be a target. And sometimes, the people who look the least threatening are the ones you should fear the most. Let me know what you think in the comments. This was Tell Me What Happened. I'll see you in the next story.